Hello, hi, political baby. Welcome to In the Real Life podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. First of all, I'm gagging. I'm not gonna lie, I'm keeping it cute, but I am gagging for real.
This guy.
Um, yes, because let me say, I started this podcast. You were one of the reasons I started my podcast. So shout out to you because
No, now I'm gonna be like on cloud nine. Oh my god. I need to hear the
no,
whole.
yeah, because like when I had the idea, you were one of the few podcasters like I could find the political baby podcast. I was like, "Ah, who is this fellow talkative? I love it. I love it." And I was like, okay, I can do this. So welcome to the pod. We talk about self-development, self-improvement, everything social improvement of our generation. And I'm just happy to have you here. Please round of applause.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So I've been aware of your podcast for a while, like as you know, so when I was podcasting as well, I know that it was in the era where many like Nigerian podcasts were also coming up at the same time. So yours
Yeah.
was also on my radar. So thank you so much for having me. So I'm really excited.
Yay. Okay. So, political baby, how did you come up with this name? Because this is such a sexy, cool ass name. What? How did you come up with that?
That
What made you even think of that? Like, how old were you? Like, what?
I think I was definitely a teenager for sure. So funny story. My Instagram name was Black Lord. Like so that was back in the 2010s when people use X and V's in their like name. So it was Black Lord. So BLXCK.LVRDE, and I felt like the coolest babe. I felt like the coolest. I felt like the coolest babe, right? So that was
Yeah.
my social media username for
Okay.
so that was my social media name for a minute. But then whilst I was like rounding up my secondary school and stuff, I've always been very political, but I even more
Mm.
so at that stage. So I had like a discourse group that I had started in school, like after school we can come and discuss political pop culture stuff. And then I now started like putting like recording myself talking about it. And I was like, oh my, this Black Lord, like it's not matching the vibe.
It's
Like
not aligning.
it's not aligning, like it's not like what is our Black Lord and like you're coming here to be chatting. So I wanted something that I think aligned with that kind of interest. And I was thinking
Yeah.
of different names, like just different I just didn't wanna keep it simple. So I was just like, okay,
Yeah.
politics, and like they call me baby at home. Like they're just like, oh, this baby, princess baby, and stuff like that. So I was just like, okay, politics, baby. So I was like, oh, political baby. So that's basically how it came across. It was just a case of I wanted something to align with this like need to be public facing with like my political interests. So that's
Yeah.
how that came. But it was Black Lord before. So that's the lore.
Did did your love for politics come naturally, or like was this developed? Like I'm trying to under because most Nigerians are apathetic towards anything politics, especially within Nigeria. Maybe they care more about even like American politics, UK politics more than Nigerian politics because every most people just feel like it's pointless. So what made you passionate towards, politics? Did you grow up in a household where things like this were regularly discussed? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Basically, so at home, my dad would come back and like he'll bring stacks of newspapers, and he'll do that thing where he'll give me the newspaper and he'll tell me to highlight certain stories and summarize it for him and be like, okay, what's your own opinion on it? So that's number one.
really?
Yeah, exactly. Or even he'll just give me trivia. He'll say, okay, who did this? When did Nigerian do this? And when did Nigerian do this? So that was kind of like the household I was
Okay,
brought up.
sure.
Like so I was reading newspapers alongside my dad. Also in primary school, current affairs was a thing, and I was like, okay, I want to do really well. I found it to be a hard subject because at that time I don't know if they do current affairs in today's curriculum, but basically you had to cram a lot of dates, and
I used to
so
get, I used to do
yeah.
ABC thing for that thing.
Honestly, that thing was tough, but I think it also made me so aware of a lot of Nigerian history at the time, which I've
History.
forgotten a bit of. But because I had to cram, it made me very politically aware in that sense. So
Aware.
that's just one aspect. And I think I was just a very curious child. I was very, very curious. I was curious about the state of the nation. I was always curious about like, oh, why is this way and why is it that way? So I think it's just like household curiosity. And also I was debating very young. So I was a competitive
Hmm.
debater, and a lot of debating publicly means that you'd have to debate about like national issues and things like that. So I think that also grew the appetite for that kind of interest as well.
Fair, fair. So I love that. I love that. At least one good thing about the Nigerian educational system, current affairs.
No, honestly, it's I always say like it's such a shame that the educational system is like this. I think because I schooled here, right? I
Yeah.
schooled here, and I think, granted, just given the schools I went to, but I will say that the education was pretty top tier in my view. So it's really a shame just seeing the way
Mm.
education is right now, child. Like, but
Yeah.
from when I was growing up, that it was pretty solid enough, right, and rigorous enough. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so Pascal baby, let's not ease into this. Let's go straight.
This one, okay.
Let's not ease into this. Do you think morality is a privilege in Nigeria? Yes or no? What do you think? Do you think it's a nuanced question or do you think it's a yes or no question?
Do we think morality? Is it a privilege? I mean, I think really, I don't want to say it depends. Like, we can sit down
Mm.
here and we can start deconstructing each part of the question. And I think the best way to do it in a very succinct manner is when we talk about, let's just talk about what happened recently, or rather a few months ago, when that
Yeah.
came to Nigeria, and then there were people begging him all over the place, and everyone was very angry that Nigerians are beggars and like we have no
Yeah.
shame, things like that. I think
Yeah.
a debate then was that, oh my gosh, like even though you're poor, why don't you have dignity, right? Why must you feel entitled? Where's your sense of morality, right? Why must you feel entitled to someone's money, despite your poverty? So I think that question about poverty and morality comes up. I think another way it comes up is during like around election times, when basically we see people in droves, they will line up and queue up for bags of rice in exchange for certain votes and things like that. And then people get angry and they say, oh my gosh, like, how can they bribe you with a bag of rice and things like that? And I
Yeah.
think when people talk about that, there is a side of the argument that is like, well, they're poor, they don't have a choice. Um, when I think about, is morality a privilege? To some extent, and again, this will not be a full bodied answer given time. To some extent, yes. So if you don't have, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you are looking for how you make your kids go to school, all these things, you are extremely vulnerable, not just to the state, but you're vulnerable to other people who have more money than you, right? And I feel like
Yeah.
then it now becomes almost, and quite literally, a life and death situation, right? Because if you don't eat for, let's say you haven't eaten for 10 days, how long can the body sustain without food? On
Yeah.
that day, right, is the
Yeah.
difference between you living and dying, right? And I think people don't think of how drastic it is, but it is that drastic. Or when, for example, you even need something like malaria medicine and you don't have it, and it's, whatever the price it is that dire. So if you're now put in that situation and someone says, okay,
Yeah.
come and take a bag of rice or something in exchange for the votes, or take money and do this thing, or someone is now falls into very illicit ways, I don't want to say it's understandable, don't get me wrong. I think I will say that because of the dire circumstances, to the point that it makes it life or death, it makes it really hard to start having a conversation about morality. That
Yes. I agree. I
um
agree.
sorry, just on that point. So that's on the privilege point, right? So if you say it's a privilege. But then I also think that morality, when it comes to Nigeria, is something that the lack of morality rather affects us all, right? Because,
Mm,
and I'll talk about in the video essay that I'm about to put out, which I talk about how the accumulation of wealth in Nigeria is associated to the state and like political power, which means that even if you are, let's say, Dangote or Tedola or something, you still have to play nice relatively to that political system. So even though you have all this money in the world, you still have to kind of play nice with the government, because
yes.
if they decide they want to crack down, they will crack down in
And there's
that.
nothing holding them responsible for maybe not doing it ethically or something.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I do think it is a privilege, but I also think it's a spectrum, really, right? So it's a spectrum. I think these are such huge questions. I will just say that it is a spectrum. I feel that it is
Mhm.
harder to access for some people than others. I think poverty
Mm,
makes it harder to access
mm.
compared to people who have resources. Absolutely. But again, it's a full-bodied question, so we can't possibly tackle it in this short amount of time.
Yeah, it's a very deep one because there's so many things that go into play. First of all, the environment or the system that is Nigeria does not even reward morality per se. Like my mom's a
Hmm.
civil servant, and I grew up watching her be moral, and it never really worked in her favor. She was never really like what's the word, she was never really like supported or like encouraged to be that way, rather misaligned or like put, you understand, rejected for being that way. So the
Yeah.
system in itself does not encourage morality, and you'd be surprised how much a system can form, like can influence the people regardless of their religious beliefs or their moral beliefs. At the end of the day, the environment plays a big part in the way that people behave.
Yeah.
But we, once in a while, we still come across a lot of people with, integrity, lots of integrity, people who refuse, for example, you know my for example, I know a friend who, like, one of his friends started like scamming, and he kind of like cut that friend off and stopped like befriending that person. And it's like, to me, it's like a two-way thing. It's like, okay, so I know you and I know your friend that started scamming, and like, to be honest, let's be for real, like, I know you have these morals and everything, but look at this, your friend and his background, and it's like, what was his other option? Like, who was going to send him to school? How was he going to, do you understand? But I also get him who's like, sticking to his morals and being like, nah, you can't make a living off um doing bad things to people and being around me. So I would like, what do you think, like, in that kind of situation, what do you think, like, when it comes to Nigeria and constantly being surrounded, by people who bend the rules? Do you fault them for it? Like, do you fault them? Do you think that there's a breakdown of morality in our society? We have a big part, because people always say that it's not just the government, it's down to the, most basic people. Because if you say it's a privilege, even the privileged are doing this. Even the privileged, a good percentage of the privileged are morally bankrupt, right?
Yeah.
But would you fault Nigerians for this? Like, what would you say would be like the major factors that result in this kind of, apart from poverty? Like, we know poverty plays a part, but Nigeria is not the only poor country.
Yes. Um, I think really the reason I'm laughing is because this is literally the topic, the core of the matter that I'm discussing right now and I'm researching about.
Wow.
So the thing about it, right, is that yes, there is a structural element. There's poverty, there are things like that. That's number one. We obviously have individual culpability, we have individual agency as well. So the onus is, I feel like everyone has some level of agency. And I
Mm,
think ability or rather the capacity to exercise that agency varies from person to person depending on
Mhm.
various um, structural issues. Now,
Okay.
yes, Nigeria is not the only poor country. Absolutely, and this is in fact what I even argue in the upcoming essay is that it is true that Nigeria is not the only poor country. However, our relationship to money is very unique, and our relationship to
Mhm.
corruption is relatively unique. What do I mean? Earlier, like a few minutes ago, I said that the way wealth and money is accumulated in this country largely rests on access to the state or proximity to the state, right? And
Yes.
because we
Yes.
understand the state has been very corrupt, the way it interacts with our citizens, the state itself defrauds the citizens, steals from the citizens, all that stuff. That means that if this state, which allows for certain accumulation of money and wealth, etc., behaves like this to its citizens and with money, I also strongly feel that that relationship between state and money also affects the way we, as citizens, also regard things like money and power and resources and things like that. You absolutely cannot distinguish the two. It's 100% has a correlation, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
way in which the state, our leaders treat and have a relationship with money and wealth is also how the citizens themselves will have a corresponding relationship to money and wealth. So it's not just about being poor, but it is about the national relationship to money and
Mm.
poverty and power. But yeah, so I think that also means that because of that specific relationship, that means that we exercise morality differently. That means that even though we are poor just like any other person, we may be more morally I don't want to say that word, more morally bankrupt. I think
Bankrupt. Do you want to say compromise?
yes, I think that there will be more morally compromised um
Yeah.
outcomes that come out, right? I
Yeah.
think that that's the case. In fact I saw a video of like it was Benin Republic and a truck fell and all the goods came out of the floor and the people were like, helping them pack that up and people were like, Chai, if it was in Nigeria they would leave and run away with these things. But it's true
Mhm.
because if you even think on it on a state level, that level of hoarding and taking and not giving back, that is how they do their
That is
thing. That
yes, and
that bleeds into the citizenry as well.
yes, yes, and one you don't want to ever say, "Oh, this is Nigerian culture," but with the way things have been going on for so long,
Yeah.
it's becoming very ingrained, even in among the children in Nigeria, to be very, very like there's no collective good in mind. Like when
Mm-hmm.
somebody is born, they are automatically taught to just completely fend for themselves, whether it is at the expense of the
Mm-hmm.
people around them or not, because it seems like that is the way that they've been taught to survive. Anyways, I want to talk about how everyone chases status, right? Everyone chases, everybody wants to be on top. But there's a way Nigerians are very aggressive. There's a way Nigerians are very aggressive with appearing to be high status.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Like even the way that we follow trends. For
Mm-hmm.
example, right before this interview, I just watched a video of this lady Cider Botch calling out Lagos girls for like literally like taking up hobbies just to appear like everyone else or just to appear
Mm-hmm.
like high in status. For example, like now paddle is the thing, right? And
Yeah.
the way people are aggressively like getting into that sport, it's like you can
Mm-hmm.
tell that this is not like genuine interest for paddle. Like this is, you understand. So why do you think Nigerians are super aggressive with status? Like why is it like almost like a life and death thing?
Yeah, I think why are we so aggressive in chasing status? Okay. I think there's a
First of all, do you even agree? Do you think, as compared to all the other nationalities that you've, been around?
I can't like Africa is not a country in that sense, and I think I can't do a mass generalization like that. I will
Yeah.
say, in from the narrow purview that I
Mm.
have from what I've seen so far, we tend to have very strong chase, pursuit, attachment to, would I say, consumption and all these types of things. And I think a large part of that is that I think there's a disjuncture or a gap between our reputation, this newfound reputation of being this modern consumer, this modern exporter. So basically, we know that Nigeria, oh my gosh, we have the Dirty Decembers. Wow, you have the tech hub, the giant of Africa, the exporter of Nollywood, the exporter of Afrobeats. It's the richest African entrepreneurs come from Nigeria. So there's this larger than life reputation of
Mm.
this modern consumer that has been bestowed upon us. But then there is a gap with the reality of an incredibly impoverished, suffering nation. So basically, just to move on, so what we're seeing is that we have this larger than life reputation that is bestowed on us as this massive modern consumer, but also modern exporter of this African modernity, of
Yeah.
tech, culture, of fashion, etc. And I don't want to say it's a certain level of imposter syndrome, because the thing with imposter syndrome is that you actually have the skill, but you feel like an imposter. We don't actually have the skill necessarily. um, a little bit of shade, but no, what I mean is that there is that gap between that big reputation of the African giant and the actual reality. And what that means is that with that gap is the need to prove something or to live up to that reputation of the modern African consumer, the modern African producer, to justify that image. So, for example, I don't know if you saw the discourse on Twitter a couple months back when it was said that Nigeria does not have fine dining. Everyone was going crazy. They were so upset. Like, what do you mean we don't have fine dining? Look at all the restaurants. Look at all the... And I'm like, no, we don't have fine dining. We don't have the standards for those high restaurant standards to be qualified as fine dining. But there was a lot of anger when
Yeah.
Nigeria found out that they did not have that. And
And
so
then,
Nigerians have such an aggressive need to show certain levels of consumption, etc., in part to live up to that reputation of this African modern. But I think
yeah.
also there's a level of escapism. Like, who wants to be told that they are poor, right? Who wants to live in that reality? So I feel
Mm.
like there's a level of consumption is a way to prove not only to an external audience but also to yourself that I not too bad though. I get iPhone, I get weed,
Facts.
you get
Literally, yeah. I don't care if there is 5K in my
I get
account.
weed,
Bitch,
I dey
bitch,
play
this is this,
paddle.
this is a bust down. Right? Yeah, 5K
Oh
or no
shit,
5K.
I got my bullshit. Like, it's a level of escapism or manifestation to yourself and to
Yeah.
an external audience as well. So I think that's
Yeah.
also um, a couple other things. So it's also, and I think a part of it is a level of exceptionalism. You get back to, and I think it goes back to that African giant thing. We're told that
Yeah.
we're the most populous African country, we're rah 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 so big. So you also want to prove. But I think that goes back to the very first point I made. So it's a level of escapism. You also want to prove that you're this African modern. But and on top of that, and I said it in one of my video essays about Nigerians' obsession with the iPhone, is that under capitalism, we have conflated our humanity with the ability to consume, right? So
Mm.
if the average person in the West can own an iPhone, it is seen as almost like a basic human, I don't want to say human experience in that case, right? And so if you're now in Nigeria, you want to be you want to access that iPhone necessarily because it's somewhat a signal of your own humanity. That for you to be able to access what everyone else can access as
Yeah.
well. Is to say, after all, now human being I be now. Why
Yeah.
I not go press iPhone? Why I not go? So we use almost these consumption materials as a proxy for our own humanity. After all,
Yeah.
is paddle is a human sport. Like why can't I play paddle in that case? So I think those are the three factors that explain that aggressive pursuit for consumption necessarily.
Fair enough. Fair enough. That makes sense. And you are right in the sense that we are always trying to prove something to ourselves and to other people. Do you think that this generation, like our generation, Gen Z, is going to be any different? Do you think we're going to make any change? Because even with like the rise of like simplicity and quiet luxury and like clean aesthetics and all that, when you look deeply into it, it's also super influenced by the West because what is really simple about Nigerian culture, like it's still that wanting to belong. It's still that. So do you think our generation is just gonna follow suit in the sense that when like as you've said, when it comes to like capitalism, consuming to kind of like not for actually your true needs or your true desires, but kind of just to like show status? Do you think our generation is following along, or do you think that we are going to be something different?
Okay, so what I think is that there is an unnecessary amount of emphasis placed on youth, right? Because you are youthful, that because you are young, that in itself means that we are going to know better and do better. And
Mm,
when you have that overemphasis on youth, you forget all the other aspects like political consciousness and education and political will and all these other more important factors. Because, for
yeah,
example, let's take the NSAS. One, I find NSAS a very interesting point in my work and in my research because yes, there were young people, but even old people. I saw people's grandparents come out and people's parents come out. So it was really a cross generational thing of enough is enough. So really, what we
yeah.
saw is not that it is necessarily okay, is the youth, but that what was different there was that consciousness. So if we only bank on youthfulness and people being young, which means that they automatically will be more liberal or progressive, then we're fooling ourselves. Everything is going to stay the same and it may be even
Mm,
worse.
yeah,
But if we're
yeah.
saying, okay, what other components can we put in the mix to change things
Mm,
from your generation, then I think we have hope that things can be
mm.
better. Yeah, that's what
So
I think.
you're saying that the youth might be the catalyst, but they are not the main ingredients. Like there's a lot of other things that come to play, and the youth might be the face of it, but like other things have to come to play for us to see change, basically.
Yes, I just think youth is overemphasized that because that people are young, they know better, they're more progressive, they have more will. It doesn't necessarily mean that, and I think we should stop focusing on like, oh yeah, the young will do this, the young will do that. Like, why? Because they are young. But
Yeah,
about what actually brings about the positive or the progressive change that we need, right? Which is
yeah,
consciousness. So, like education, will, determination, community gathering, resources, all these other things that make it possible for us to
yeah,
change the way things are. So that's what I think. I think we are overemphasizing youth about being of we are overemphasizing youth in being this
yeah.
reason or driver for change.
Okay, fair enough. That makes sense. So our last episode, it was also a topic similar to this, right? So I talked about how on the climb up, when you're trying to be successful, people who are super ambitious are more likely to slowly begin to lose their humanity, right?
Mhm.
And it happens slowly. You don't really recognize it until you actually become self-aware about it. So it's like, this is a self-improvement podcast. Why do we need to talk about being a good person and moralities? Because ambitious people are more prone to lose their humanity because they are getting in the field, they're having a lot of experiences that shape them, harden them, things like this. Nigeria, the way Nigeria is super capitalistic. Like even the basic things that the government is supposed to provide, you find, you know, um, members of the public providing such things for profit. For example, running water in a village or something like this. This is general basic things. I feel like a lot of people, especially like people from outside Nigeria, maybe other Africans, when they interact with Nigerians, they might have the impression that Nigerians are a bit hardened or are a bit I don't want to use the word aggressive. I feel like I've used it too much. But do you think yeah, I don't want to use the word aggressive, but they might feel like we're a bit hardened, we're a bit like rash, we're a bit like and do you think that this capitalistic nature of Nigeria, because as much as the government does run things, like they have the power in their hands, but making things happen, they're not making things happen for the citizens. A lot of citizens are stepping up to the plate, making these things happen for their own, profit, for their own profit. So most people in Nigeria, they might be working 2 or 3 jobs, but they do have a business, so they have something. So almost everybody in Nigeria is a capitalist, basically. So do you think that also feeds into like the Nigerian character of like being a bit harsh, being a bit like not so, you know, vulnerable, caring, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Um Yes, basically. I think that's the short answer. You're right in the sense that Nigeria, like many places, is capitalist, right? In as much
Mm,
as people try to say otherwise, but it is. And
mm.
the way that system necessarily works is that it's devoid of actual morality. It's devoid of
Yeah,
sympathy. It's devoid of
yeah.
humanity because for you to accumulate a certain amount of wealth, right, it relies on certain levels of exploitation. And I think when you take the system, capitalism, right, on its own and how it's devoid of all these things like humanity in itself, coupled with excessive poverty that it produces, is ridiculously harsh. It's a dog eat dog world for real. Dog eat dog world. So absolutely, I
Fact.
think that's the simple answer. Yes.
Fair, fair, fair. So, political baby, you're so brilliant. I love your understanding of Nigerian sociology. I want to ask you, like, navigating Nigeria. Wait, how much do you even say Nigeria? Like, how often? Like, how often are you in Nigeria?
Okay, so I grew up here, schooled here. Um, I would say I live almost half now, at least in the past year. It's been half and half, but I think prior to that, it's been mostly in Nigeria. I think now,
Mm,
just like work and everything, I'm kind of half here, half in
up
Nigeria.
there.
But yeah, but
Yeah.
a better part of my life up until now has been in Nigeria. Yeah.
Okay. So, have you ever had to like personally compromise your ethics because you were navigating like your personal ethics just because you had to navigate something like in Nigeria, maybe work or have you ever felt like done something and you're feeling like is this country like
No comment, girl. You're speaking to my
give
lawyers.
period. Fair enough. All right. So the people who listen to my podcast, they are go-getters, they're young
Mhm.
people, they're creators, they're entrepreneurs. They want to be like political baby. You feel me? Like they want to be out there, they want to be in alignment with their purpose, they want
Mhm.
to be showing their talents, they want to basically grow the way that you have grown over the few years. And I'm just so proud of you, especially like with your recent long form content. You're doing great.
Thank you.
So I want you to go on a mommy rant, literally, like not mommy, obviously. We're not mommifying political baby, but I want you to go on a rant, kind of like an advice rant for the people who are listening. Most of the people who are listening are your age.
Mm-hmm.
and they just trying to figure it out. This African youth trying to figure it out, trying to be something, make something out of the talents that God has given them. So go on an advice round. What are the self-improvement thoughts that have been ruminating in your head recently?
Oh, I absolutely love this because I love the rant. I think Nigeria is a really hard place, right? And we need to do whatever we can to survive, which means a lot of us have to do 9 to 5s, etc. And you do your office job, and you maybe most likely have no sense of fulfillment, but there is something nagging you at the back of your mind. I'm not
Hmm.
supposed to be doing this. I know I'm supposed to be for much more. Listen to that voice, right? And so whatever little time you can carve, right, just really use that time to develop, to explore. And I think the thing about it is I was saying the other day that I've had a bit of time to really develop Political Baby as a platform, as a community, because I started really early in my early teenage years. But funny story, I wanted to be in the World Bank back then. I wanted to be in this high-powered corporate career, and I think one day my mom said, I don't think you actually want to do that. I think you want to do that because it is a socially acceptable thing to do. But I have a feeling that media is your calling. And
You have a cool mom, by the way. Your mom is
yeah,
cool. What?
like so cool. She's so cool. She's like my editor. She helps me come up with research. She helps me.
No
She
way.
even titled
No
my
way.
video essay, came up with the topic, by the way, wedding to celebrity pipeline. She came up with that topic and you know, brought the title. So I really
Wow.
credit her for my ability to become this and to fully work in that purpose, because I was always like, no, like I don't want to say respectable, but yeah, like those respectable jobs,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she was like,
I want to
no,
be able to say I'm working in the World Bank and everybody's
yeah, I
World
wanted to
Bank.
be like, governor of CBN. And she told me one day, she said, no. And this
Uh,
was like way over a decade ago. Your calling, and she didn't even just say media, she said, your calling is to enlighten people. That is your
hmm.
calling. That is the purpose of your life. And that is where you find true fulfillment. I said, ta! Oh, it's in Sunday talk to. Is that one job? And through the time, no matter how far I run, it kept coming back. So whatever it is that is nagging you in the back of your mind, like explore it and explore different things. I've done many different things. I've done law, I've done tech, I've done
Yeah,
finance, I've done all sorts. Explore as much as you want. Those are the main aspects. Another thing is like it may not be popular. Like for example, when I did the Political Baby thing, that's also to make it more spicy. When I was doing all these rants on social media and like video essays on social media, it was not cool. I remember the first one I uploaded. One girl that I knew, she said, "You're wasting my data, right? You're wasting my data. You're talking."
what?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If she sees me now, she's like, I love your video essays. But I've had a decade of doing this, and it was not cool. People used to mock me. I had a discourse group in school where basically we'll come and we'll sit down and we'll talk about all these topics. This was before pre-woke. This is before
Mm.
people thought it was cool to be woke and
To be woke, to be
so we were
aware.
like, oh, see this one, they talk. And so I've done it for a year, like for a decade, really, before it was cool, right? So you have to so the question you have to ask yourself is like, how long can you stick to something, if that makes sense? How long can you stick to something if no one is watching you, if no one claps for you? I used to do a podcast, like you mentioned before, I used to do Political Baby podcast. I would get so angry after mixing, getting guests, the production is fire, 100 people listen to it. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Now, fast forward years later, I dropped my first video essay, and wow, okay, in the first few days, 25K views. But
yeah.
I had periods where, even trying to crack 100 people to listen to a podcast
It
episode
was.
was hard. I
And you
had to
had
do
good
that.
guests.
You
And you
get
had
great
good
guests,
guests.
and the production was crazy. that thing was crazy. I still listen to my former episodes, and I'm like, this is production.
Yeah.
And trying to break 100 listens per episode was hard. So when I'm now like dropping something and every time it goes viral, I had a whole decade where there was nothing, it was dry. So
Mm.
how long can you stick to something until you finally get your breakthrough, until it finally becomes cool, until people begin to resonate with you? You have to stay the course. So
Mm.
that's one thing I'm even trying to like always tell myself, like, do not despise the days of it, of small beginnings. You have to stay the course, and you have to appreciate how all these elements come together, because of that podcast, I was able to know how to produce so that I could produce such high quality video essays that are,
Yeah.
where you see them now. So
Yeah.
because I was debating when I was like 10, 11 years old is what helps me with my arguments now. So you
Mm.
have to also understand that every single point in your life feeds into where you're supposed to be, for sure.
Mm.
So that's my rant. That's my mommy rant.
That is so good, girl. You know what? You even answered one of my questions because I literally was gonna ask you, like, because I heard someone say, like, oh, when people see people blow, they don't
Yeah,
know what, they don't know how many, how much time that person has put in of
yeah.
like obscurity. And I was like, political babe do not have any obscurity. That video just went 25K. Like, I need to ask this babe what she's doing. Now you're
Um,
here telling me you've been doing a decade. Like, sis, T. That's amazing. A decade, and there's so much more, so much more to come for you. And I'm wishing you the best. Go political, baby.
woo!
Um, okay, this is so unrelated, but like, quick question. This one way they give these wedding people. Do you want to get married?
Do
Like,
I
do
want
you
to get
are you
married? Uh,
yeah? Are you interested in marriage?
I think that's such an interesting question. I'm very interested. Like those I always say those like men that you meet on like let's say dating apps and they hit 30 and their first question is, are you interested in marriage? That's what that question reminds me
Literally, like, first date. I know what I want. I want to get married.
of. I
Literally, I'm like, okay, okay, I'm here for the vibes, though.
real real. Marriage is an interesting one. It's something that I know Nigerian women love, and I think the reason why that was my topic is because we love it, and I feel like we're not critical enough about it. Even us as feminists, right?
Yeah,
We don't really sit down to unpack it because, like, yeah. So basically, I'm a lover's girl. I'm a huge romantic. I love the concept of romance in itself. I like the concept of like seeing someone that really understands and sees you romantically, right? And I grew up on all these fairy tale, da da da, ba, 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 ba. And I always say, who doesn't really like love? However, I am interested in how that love then becomes a commercial project. So,
mm,
am I interested in marriage? Like that's such a that's such a man who wants to get married first date question. I will say that
yeah,
I love partnership. I love like romance and like people who are meant to be together finding themselves. I think what I tend to be a bit critical is how we experience that love into a commercial project. But I have nothing against weddings at all. At
yeah,
all. I have nothing against weddings. I'm like, hey guys, you guys have turned it into something else. Let's talk about it. I think that's my
yeah.
perspective. on that. Yeah.
No, no,
How
no,
about
no.
yourself?
We know the motive is good. Don't worry. You're safe. You're safe.
How about
You're
yourself?
safe. Um, do I want to get married? I do actually. Like, not gonna lie, that fairy tale, it kind of worked on me. What Disney
Yeah.
worked, girl.
Yeah. No,
Good
absolutely.
one.
Like, for example, yeah. No, for example, like I even said in the video essay, I criticize what I desire, right? So, or like, and that can be anything. It may not be like such a strong desire. So, for example, because I'm a romantic, and I'm also someone who has a strong legal I am perspective. That means you want to
Yeah.
make sure everything's locked in, marriage contract. So a wedding, or rather a marriage, is something that is would make sense for where that partnership should go from a trajectory perspective. But I'm
Yeah.
also just kind of mindful in the way like you begin to start commercializing that romantic love, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, like, yeah, wedding, yeah, but let's not make it showbiz.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you, babe. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed this chit chat. It felt so
No.
natural. You're so cool and down to earth. And this was an amazing chat. Enjoy the rest of your day. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you so much.
Political baby.
Thank you so.
Anything you want to say to the for lifers?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for rocking with this podcast. Let me tell you guys, it's not easy. So just listening to the podcast, we appreciate you. It's not easy.
Yes.
And also subscribe to my YouTube channel at Political Baby. Period.
Yes. Yeah. All right. Political baby Okike Okon in the real life podcast signing out. Mwah.
Wow.